We often talk about chasing wealth. We picture maybe big bank balances, fancy houses. But what if? What if true wealth is something else entirely? Something you can't quite put on a balance sheet, but feels much more important.
That's exactly where we're headed today, exploring this really powerful idea that maybe the ultimate luxury money buys isn't, a thing at all.
Okay.
It's freedom, specifically having control over your own time, that incredibly precious, non-renewable asset we all have.
So today we're diving deep into the psychology, connecting happiness, money, and this idea of personal autonomy. We're pulling insights from our source material, which is excerpts from Psychology, CSB7.pdf.
Yeah, and our mission here is really to boil down the most crucial takeaways from these pages for you, to help understand how money, especially when you look at it through this lens of controlling your time, can actually build towards a genuinely well-lived life. It's kind of a shortcut to being really informed on this connection.
Okay, so let's start right there then. Unpack this core idea. The source, it kicks off with a really striking definition of freedom. It says, the highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today.
Hmm.
That really shifts things, doesn't it? It's not just about having cash. It's
Yeah.
redefining wealth.
It totally does because, we usually think wealth equals possessions, right? The bigger house, the faster car, but this flips it.
Right.
It's not about what you have, but the freedom to decide how you use your time, your most valuable resource, really. And the source hammers this home. It says, the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want is priceless.
Priceless.
Yeah, it is the highest dividend money pays.
Yeah,
That's a powerful statement.
it really is. And, for a long time, figuring out what actually made people happy was, well, a bit fuzzy for researchers.
Mm-hmm.
Until a psychologist named Angus Campbell started asking different kinds of questions back in the 80s.
Ah, Campbell,
Right.
University of Michigan.
That's him. His 1981 book, The Sense of Well-Being in America, it was a real departure because back then psychology was mostly looking at, problems,
Yeah.
depression, anxiety, that sort of thing.
Right. Disorders.
But Campbell, he wanted to understand what made people genuinely happy.
Exactly. And what he found was pretty fascinating, actually. First off, people were generally happier than a lot of folks assumed. But the kicker was he couldn't just group the happiest people by the usual things: income, where they lived, education level.
So it wasn't like, oh, rich people are happiest.
Not necessarily. I mean, sure, some were, but plenty of people with high incomes or fancy degrees were, frankly, miserable, and
Right.
vice versa.
Okay.
So Campbell dug deeper. And his conclusion was really profound. He stated, and this is a quote worth remembering, having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well-being than any of the objective conditions of life we have considered.
Wow. More dependable than income or education.
More dependable than any of the objective conditions. Think
Yeah.
about that. It means it's not primarily your external situation, how much money you make, the house you live in, but your internal feeling, that sense of autonomy, of being in the driver's seat of your own life. That's what truly predicts well-being. It's a real game changer in how we think about happiness.
Okay, so if Campbell nailed it down to this sense of control being the key predictor, what does that tell us about money itself? How does money fit into getting that control?
Well, that's the crucial link, isn't it? And our source is very clear on this. Money's greatest intrinsic value, and this is really the core idea, is its power to give you control over your time.
How so?
It lets you build up, maybe slowly, bit by bit, a level of independence, autonomy. And this comes from having unspent assets, as the source calls them. Think savings, investments,
Yeah.
just having enough buffer so you're not living paycheck to paycheck, essentially.
Right, having some breathing room.
And exactly. Breathing room gives you power. Power over what you do and when you do it. The source gives some really concrete examples that make this clear.
Okay, like what?
Well, imagine being able to take a few sick days without worrying about losing income. That's huge for some people.
Yeah, definitely.
Or, say you get laid off. Having enough saved means you can wait for a good job, the right fit, instead of just grabbing the first thing that comes along out of desperation.
That's a big one.
Or having maybe 6 months of emergency expenses tucked away. Suddenly, a bad boss isn't quite so terrifying, is it? Because you know you're not trapped, you have options.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the freedom to maybe take a job that pays less but offers more flexibility. Shorter commute, better hours, things that improve your actual daily life.
Things luxury goods can't really buy.
Precisely. Or dealing with a medical emergency without the added nightmare of financial stress compounding everything. And the ultimate example, perhaps. Retiring when you choose to, not just when you absolutely have to stop working.
That really paints a picture. It makes so much sense. Using your money to buy back your time, to create options.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a lifestyle benefit that, like you said, very few fancy things can actually compete with. And the source shares this really vivid personal story about the trap of time poverty. It's about someone who, all through college, was convinced investment banking was the path. Why? The money, pure and simple.
Ah, the classic lure.
Right. So they land this summer internship, first day. Reality hits, hard. The job was, and I'm quoting here, intellectually stimulating, paid well, and made me feel important. Sounds good so far.
Okay, but
But every waking second of my time became a slave to my boss's demands. Every second. There was even the saying in the office, if you don't come to work on Saturday, don't bother coming back on Sunday.
wow. That's intense.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a 4-month internship. They lasted 1 month. Just walked away.
That story is such a perfect illustration of this psychological idea called reactance. Jonah Berger, he's a marketing professor, explains it really well.
Yeah, it's reactive.
Basically, people like to feel like they're in control in the driver's seat. When you try to force them to do something, even something they might have otherwise wanted to do, they feel like their power is being taken away.
So they push back.
Exactly. They feel disempowered, so they say no, or they do something else entirely just to reassert their autonomy. It's that gut reaction against feeling controlled.
That really drives home how vital that feeling of control is. Because, like the source says, doing something you love on a schedule you can't control can feel the same as doing something you hate.
That's such a crucial point.
So this whole idea of using money strategically, not just for stuff, but to buy back your time, to shape a life where you have that control,
Yeah,
it just offers this incredible return, doesn't it?
absolutely.
It reminds me of that Derek Sivers anecdote the source mentions, the entrepreneur. He told a friend he actually got rich way before he sold his company for
Oh, right, when he was young.
Yeah, at 22, he had this day job paying like $20,000 a year, but his living expenses were super low, only about $1,000 a month. He was earning $1,800 a month,
So he had a surplus.
a decent surplus, and he realized, hey, I can cover my costs easily with just a bit of freelance work. He felt totally free. Quit the day job a month later, never had a traditional job again, the big company sale later. He said that was just more money in the bank. The real feeling of freedom, of being rich, happened years earlier when he gained control over his time.
That's a fantastic example of this principle in action.
And this leads us straight into a really striking paradox that the material points out. Think about it. The United States is, by many measures, the richest nation in history. Wealth and income are much higher than, say, the 1950s, even adjusted for inflation.
Right, objectively wealthier.
Yet, there's little evidence that its citizens are, on average, happier today than they were back then. How can that be?
Yeah, the data backs that up pretty starkly. There was a big Gallup poll in 2019, 150,000 people, 140 countries. It found about 45% of Americans said they felt a lot of worry the day before, the global average. 39%.
Worry is higher. What about stress?
Stress, too.
Yeah.
55% of Americans felt a lot of stress. The global average was 35%. So, richer nation, but seemingly more worried and stressed.
So what's the explanation? Why aren't we happier if we're richer?
Well, the source offers a really compelling argument. It suggests that, by and large, we've used that increased wealth to buy, well, bigger and better stuff.
Material thing.
Exactly. The median American home, for instance. It went from about 983 square feet in 1950 to over 2,400 square feet by 2018.
Wow, more than doubled.
Yeah. More bathrooms than people living there, often faster cars, sharper TVs, you name it. But, and this is the crucial part, the source argues we've simultaneously given up more control over our time.
So the gains from stuff are canceled out by the loss of time control.
That seems to be the idea. At best, they cancel each other out. Even though median family income adjusted for inflation jumped significantly, like from roughly $29,000 in 1955 to over $62,000 in 2019, we just aren't seeing that translate into higher average happiness levels. So the trade-off hasn't paid off in terms of well-being.
And a huge factor in this loss of time control seems to be how work itself has changed. The source brings up John D. Rockefeller, interestingly.
The oil tycoon, how does he fit in?
Well, his approach to work was apparently quite unique for his time. He wasn't about busy work or physical labor. He was often quiet, observing, just thinking, making decisions. That was his real work.
Strategic thinking.
Right. He even used to recite this little poem. A wise old owl lived in an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why aren't we all like that wise old bird? He got that his main output wasn't something he did with his hands, but what happened in his head.
That's fascinating and definitely different from most work back then. In 1870, think about it, most jobs were manual, like 46% in agriculture, 35% in crafts or manufacturing.
Tangible work.
Very tangible. You could see the output. And crucially, when you clocked out, you clocked out. You left the work there. But today, it's completely flipped.
How so?
Well, now something like 38% of jobs are classified as managers, officials, and proprietors. These are overwhelmingly thought-based jobs. Your primary tool, as the source puts it, is your head, which never leaves you.
So the work follows you home.
Exactly. It feels like it never really ends.
Oh, I definitely feel that. I think a lot of us do. You're thinking about work stuff on your commute, right? Or while you're making dinner, putting the kids to bed. Maybe you even wake up at 3 a.m. stressing about a deadline or an email. So even if you're technically on the clock for fewer hours than someone might have been in 1950, it feels like you're working constantly because your brain is always engaged with it.
Derek Thompson from The Atlantic put it brilliantly. He said something like, if the operating equipment of the 21st century is a portable device, this means the modern factory is not a place at all. It is the day itself.
Wow. The day itself is the factory.
Think about it. Laptops, smartphones, they free our tools from the office, right? Which sounds great, but it also means we can theoretically be productive anywhere, anytime, which often translates to feeling like we should be productive anywhere, anytime.
So comparing ourselves to earlier generations, our actual control over our time, our mental space, it's arguably lessened.
It seems that way. And if Campbell was right, and that sense of control is paramount for well-being, well, it starts to make sense why we aren't necessarily happier despite being richer. We've traded some control for other things.
This leads us really nicely into some powerful wisdom that comes from looking back over a whole lifetime. The source mentions the work of Carl Pillemer, a gerontologist.
Yes. His book, 30 Lessons for Living. Fascinating stuff.
He interviewed 1,000 elderly Americans, right?
Yeah.
Asking them about the most important lessons they learned over their long lives.
That's right. 1,000 people who'd seen it all. And what's really striking is what they didn't say.
Okay, what did they say?
Well, Pillemer emphasizes this. Not one single person out of that 1,000 said that the key to happiness was working as hard as you possibly can just to make money to buy more things.
Nobody said that.
Nobody. Nor did anyone say it was important to, keep up with the Joneses, be as wealthy as your neighbors, or that having more stuff equals success.
Interesting. What else?
And critically, no one advised choosing your career based purely on how much money you might earn down the line. That wasn't the advice they gave for a fulfilling life.
So what did they value, looking back?
It was much more about human connection and time. Things like quality friendships, being part of something bigger than just themselves, like community or purpose.
Yeah.
And spending quality, unstructured time with their children.
Time with kids.
Yeah, Pillemer quotes them directly on this. They said things like, your kids don't want your money or what your money buys anywhere near as much as they want you. Specifically, they want you with them. Just your presence, your time.
Wow. That's pretty profound advice, coming from people who have lived through it all.
It really is.
So if you take it from them, from those who've seen the whole picture, controlling your time really is the highest dividend money pays. So wrapping this deep dive up, it feels like we've landed on a really clear central insight, doesn't it? Money's most valuable role might not be acquiring possessions, but actually buying freedom, buying control over your own time.
Yeah, it reframes it as the ultimate lifestyle upgrade, in a way. Not the fancy car, but the ability to choose how you spend your hours.
Which definitely encourages some reflection, I think, for you listening.
Exactly. If you connect this back to the bigger picture of your own life, how might rethinking that relationship between money and time actually change things day to day? Or even your long-term happiness? It's worth considering.
And maybe one final thought to leave you with, building on that idea of the highest dividend money pays. What about the lowest dividends? As you think about gaining control, maybe also ask yourself, what are you currently spending money on that isn't giving you back time or freedom? What might actually be costing you peace of mind rather than enhancing it? That's definitely something interesting for you to explore on your own.